Welcome back to our last series in Awkward. So today we're talking about awkward love, which sounds like something out of high school, I know, but anyway, we are talking about love today. And we all know that we need love. The question is, how do we define love, interpret love? What is love? And I think we all know, if we think about it, that love is a lot more than an emotion and the way we feel, but love is action. Love is a verb. I'm sure you're very familiar with the Beatles song, "Love is all we need. All we need is love, love, love." I don't know if you've ever read the lyrics on the song, but it doesn't really say much about what love is. In fact, it doesn't really say a lot. Now, I'm not criticizing the most beloved band in the history of America and England. I'm just saying that John Lennon really didn't know a lot about love. In fact, in his own words, this is what he said. He says, this is why I'm always on about peace, you see. It's the most violent people who go for love and peace. Everything's the opposite, but I sincerely believe in love and peace. I don't know if you know John Lennon's story, but it was pretty violent, and he was a very abusive man. So he goes to say that, well, it's not what I do, it's what I sing that matters. And if you read some of the testimonies from the people, the stories from the people of his life, you can tell that's exactly how he lived. Now, I don't think Lennon had a clue. And even though the song is catchy and the phrase is catchy and it resonates with people and it kind of connects with us and makes us feel the emotions of love maybe, or think about those emotions, it's not really a good definition of love. And so, what is love? And I would say that love is action. You feel loved by someone because they do something. They say something to you, they spend time with you, they do something for you, they touch you, they hold you. All those kinds of things could be someone did something and therefore you ultimately feel love. Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are His dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered Himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. So Paul's advice is to imitate God. Now, that can sound a little strange in a world that thinks God is disconnected, that God is cruel, that God's unkind, that God doesn't care. And you have to ask yourself, why do people think that? Because John knew in 1 John 4:8 that God is love. God doesn't just love people. God Himself exists as and defines love. But what we do is we typically define love by our own actions and by our own needs. In fact, what I'm saying is our definition of love, we choose to define by ourselves. And it usually ends up being somewhat self-centered. And real love, in a world drowning in that kind of self-absorption, can look like hate. And that's why God gets slandered, I guess, because people don't know what real love is. But Paul teaches us to imitate God because God is love, according to 1 John 4:8. So how can we imitate God? And how can you do that if you can't even comprehend God's love for you? Paul wrote this in Ephesians 3:18. May you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep His love is. So the beginning of learning to love is getting to know love Himself, which is God, the very definition of love. You could do that through studying the Bible, and you can begin to see how God's actions are so loving. Now, I know that you're going to see God's actions in certain places as not loving, as cruel. But if God defines love, and the Bible tells us that God is love, maybe we should look, rather than dismiss God as unloving, maybe we should look for the love in the passages that we don't understand as loving. The other thing is Jesus. Jesus is the example. Jesus came to this world. The Bible tells us in Philippians 2 that He left the glories of heaven. He laid aside all that about Him that was divine, left that in heaven, came to earth as a man, God as a man. Now, not only did He do that, He lived a normal life for pretty much 30 years, as normal for the time period in which He lived. Then He was baptized at the river, and then everything accelerated, and Jesus began to teach. He began to love people, heal people, hold people, listen to people. Just an amazing ministry that Jesus had with people. And for that love and that truth and that demonstration of love that people didn't quite understand, then he was arrested, he was accused, arrested, he was condemned, he was beaten, he was murdered. Then, 3 days later, he lived again. And isn't that what love is? Isn't love about rising again? Isn't love about the fact that you've taken the gut punches, you've taken the sucker punch, you staggered, you regathered, and you re-entered. You started again. You see that through that love just defines Christianity. And not just through words, not just, hey, we love you guys. And certainly not through agreement, which we'll come back to. But Christianity loved people through action. The early Christians, there's one account of the early Christians that goes like this. When a devastating plague swept across the ancient world in the 3rd century, Christians were the only ones who cared for the sick, which they did at the risk of contracting the plagues themselves. Meanwhile, others were throwing infected members of their own families into the streets even before they died in order to protect themselves from the disease. So you see, early Christians knew that love was action. Acts tells us in Acts 2:44, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, shared their meals with great joy and generosity. See, there's so much love in the early church, so much love in the early Christians that they learned from Jesus, who demonstrated the Father. So by imitating God, learning from Jesus' example, we become like those early Christians, and we take on and we begin to express love in our lives. Now, that's what love is. Now, what is love not? Well, the Bible goes on in Ephesians 5:3. It says, let there be no sexual immorality, impurity, or greed among you. Such sins have no place among God's people. Well, love isn't using people. Love isn't using people for fantasy, for sex, for money. It's not any of those kind of things. And so love doesn't use people. Love doesn't lie to people. When I say I love you, it means I'm willing to tell you the truth. I'm willing to tell you the truth that's appropriate to our relationship and our space and our time. You see, the Bible says in Romans 12:15, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. That can only happen with vulnerability. That can only happen as we tell the truth about what's going on inside of us with each other, and we share our lives, both the good and the bad. Love also means discovering the things, the expectations within us. Have you ever realized you have lots of expectations and you may not even know what they are? And so it creates a lot of frustration as a parent, as a spouse. And so what if you begin to discover your actual expectations, dismiss, let go of the unhealthy ones, and begin to actually articulate the healthy ones, telling the truth? You see, love doesn't lie. Love doesn't hide things. And so love is a lot of powerful things, and it's not some things. It's definitely not using people, definitely not lying to people. And love has some things. Love is some things, love is not some things, and love has some things. The Bible says in Ephesians 5:25, husbands, this means love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean. Love has a focus. Christ is focused on the church is focused on Christ. Love has a purpose, and that purpose is to make someone more. You see, Jesus is making the bride more than she was before. Obviously, the bride can't add anything to Jesus, but the bride can work among itself as a body. When you see itself as an ecclesia, as a church, being a body of people who exist in the priesthood of the believers, when you see that, they build each other up. So love has a focus. It focuses on Jesus. It focuses on others. It has a purpose of making people more. And love has a blessing. And that's what we really need to grasp and understand, is that we're here to bless people. And that's what love does. Love blesses. It blesses the people you work with. It blesses the people you go to church with. It blesses your family. Love is a blessing. So let's learn how to make it weird, make it awkward, and love people.